Shabbat Shalom. Try that one more time. Shabbat Shalom. There we go. I should note before I share some words of Torah that it's not lost on me that this morning around 4 a.m. I got a lot of notifications on my phone of the missile attacks in Israel, which were in response to the beginning of we'll call it a war in Iran. And full disclosure, within a few hours I didn't have a chance to adjust my Devar Torah to address the current political conflict. But what I will say is later in our service we'll have a chance to share a number of meaningful prayers, hopefully expressing the thoughts and emotions that we're carrying in our hearts. And I will, of course, devote this Devar Torah l'shem, the safety of the people of Israel, to the inhabitants of the Middle East, and for the swift success of the U.S. military and the Israel Defense Forces. That being said, let's take a look at this week's Torah portion, Tetzaveh. Tetzaveh, if you want to open up, it is found, I'm looking at page 504 in your red Humashim. And it's a very unique Torah portion, as lots of verses, over about 90 verses, are devoted to clothing. God is instructing Moses how to dress his brother, the high priest Aaron. It reminds me of how I was once instructed how to dress by my sister, Julie. She's not here. It was a coming-of-age story in the Earne household. I, up until perhaps adolescence, faithfully wore what my mom bought me, which was likely what was on sale at the local A&A's, Gold Circle, Hills. These are all department stores from the 1980s. And my sister pulled me aside and said, now that you're a bar mitzvah, I don't think she used those terms, she said, well, you got to start stopping at these other stores. I remember she taught me about a store called The Gap, Banana Republic, and the rest is history. That anecdote aside, I want to ask us a question of, is it good or bad that our Torah portion is devoting so much time to the idea of how our high priests should dress? Does clothing matter? Does clothing matter? Is it worthwhile or not? Marjorie. There is some research, that is true, that shows that it does. Do you want to share some of that research? Oh, very nice. Very, very nice. Yes, color and style. And the research that I'm aware of in preparing for this Devar Torah is that when someone speaks, it's like a 60 or 70% of the acceptance or how someone is received has to do with how they are dressed. So hopefully my tie is up here. But yeah, there's research that shows that dress matters. Good. So it makes sense. Anyone else agree? Anyone else disagree? Yeah. Oh, I see some hands over here. Yes. You object. Okay, yes. B'chavod. So why? You can't just object here. We've got to be sharing words of Torah here. So why should it not matter? Clothing is superficial. Walk me through what that means. We're taught, right? We don't judge someone, right? We don't judge a book by its cover. Fair? Yeah. Okay. I have to say, when our youth director raises his hand, I always want to learn Torah from our youth director. So Diana first, Laura Ben.
I gotta say, how many times has my mom told me dress for the job?
Dress for the job. Okay, very good. Why should we dress for the job? Why does that matter?
Own your position. Own the privilege and the opportunity you've been given.
Own the position. Own the privilege. And by dressing, we show that we are choosing to care about the work and the responsibilities that we have. Good. Diana.
I have like two things to say, to keep it as short as I can. But one thing is that, look, I'm sure people here maybe are like sports, whether it's a little league team or your favorite NFL team or your favorite NFL team, but they have certain clothes, their uniforms, and it's like you can, and I think it's part of your identity. And you see somebody in that uniform, in that way, they go to play, they're feeling like, wow, I'm part of something larger than myself. That's one thing. There are rules in Judaism about clothing. Mourners, for example, wear clothing that reflects that they're mourners. We have certain ideas about clothing, whether it's the tzitzit, the garment, that religious thing. And then finally, what I want to say is that it has been said that the reason that the Jewish people have survived as long as we have is because when we were in exile, we took our names, our clothing, and our teaching with us. So arguably, our clothing and the way we are and present ourselves has also been part of our survival.
Really nice. Our clothing, how we present ourselves has been part of our survival. Very interesting. You shared earlier, and I want to thank you for the promotion of our Purim Megillah reading. By the way, it's Monday night, and we are all dressing up in our team's shirts, and the theme is going to be sports. So how about that, right? So dress up in the colors of your team. And then, Dan, you said something really powerful, which is the law. I would say it's more of a custom, but one of those customs that sort of became established, that when we are mourning, we are supposed to dress a certain way. And that's what I want to follow up with you on. Why is that the case? Why do we, when we are mourning, wear a ribbon or wear a torn shirt? What's the purpose of that? It's pretty good. I'm asking you, Rabbi.
It's really an acknowledgement. Well, there are a lot of different reasons. I mean, when you actually tear, the real kriya is like you're tearing your actual clothing. It's like, it's a sacrifice for the person that gave you life. Like you can tear your clothing. And then in the old days, they would actually sew it up. And you could see almost like a scar. And then they would tear it again, and you could see a scar. So it's to differentiate. It's who you are. Like there are things that you don't do. So someone would be like, hey, like let's go to this cool concert. You're like, no can do.
Right. Thank you. So it's both an expression of how we are feeling on the inside that gives some validity to those emotions, and it is a way that we signal to those that we encounter that we are in a different space. We are in a place of mourning, so that one doesn't come to you and say, let's go to the movie, because they're reading the clothing that you have. Really good. Neil.
I think with the high priest, it's not about the we, it's about his individual identity, because there's only one job, and it represents his relationship to God and his relationship to the people. So he's out there. It's not about we. He doesn't look the same as everybody else. He has to look like the only person he is.
So when you have a specific role, and you are in the role of high priest, you want something that links you to the responsibility and the people. That was pretty powerful, right? So that it's somehow linked to being a high priest, serving God. Perhaps we can read into that some of the white themes of the outfit. And then the people, we're going to learn today about something called Urim V'Tumim. These are types of stones, amulets, that are on the shield that the Kohen wears. And supposedly there's 12, one that corresponds to each member, each tribe, so that the priest would always maintain connection. So there was a functional part of the clothing, and nice, great. Anyone else? Pro or con? Marge, yeah. Wait, so my evaluation of someone can be separate from how someone is dressed or how I'm dressed? Ah.
So if you relate out of respect, right?
Yes.
Versus thinking they're fantastic because they dress
Oh,
well.
nice. Nice. Really nice. Anyone else? See other hands? Oh, yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Clothes command respect, but clothes don't make man himself.
What makes a man or makes a person?
Their character.
A character.
So I think clothes aren't the most necessary aspect of a priest, but it can show this person has proven that they have high character and that they are worthy of this position.
There's symbolic power in the clothing that we wear that communicates the role that they have accepted and the type of character that they embody. One more, yes.
From a historical perspective,
Yes.
the Romans occupied Jerusalem
Yeah.
in the Second Temple period. One of the first things they did was they took the priestly clothing and only allowed him to wear it certain times of the year. So powerful was the image. They wanted to control power. Didn't want the priest to have access to his clothing every day.
Wonderful. Wow, Yasher Koach. Didn't realize that. Yasher Koach. Did everyone hear that? That the Romans, as a way of demonstrating their power, limited the times that the high priest could dress in their clothing, and in the curbing of those, when the priest could wear that clothing, demonstrated the authority of the Roman Empire. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. So it's a mixed bag here. There is utility, there's purpose in the clothing that we wear, and there's also risk. And the Torah is very much aware of this. And we can see it in two interesting ways. The first is, what is the Hebrew word for clothing? Begadim. Okay? It's a very interesting root. Beged means clothing. It also is the same root for betrayal, to mislead. So there's this already in the choice of words, there is this idea that clothing can represent someone and can also misrepresent someone. And in choosing to dress the priest, the Torah was aware of the risk of clothing and also the opportunity of clothing. On a deeper level, look at the letters that spell the word for clothing. What are the three letters that spell the word, the root for begadim? Bet, Daled. Okay. Anyone see a relationship between those three letters? The second, third, and fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which sparks a very interesting drash. That is, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is what? Aleph. Okay? Aleph has a number of interesting characteristics. Number one, what is the sound that an aleph makes? I should hear silence. I should hear an aleph needs a vowel or it needs some type of tool to express itself. Interesting. Isn't that beautiful? How like begadim are a tool for us expressing ourselves, and they literally chose the letters that allow the aleph to express itself. An aleph, we also believe to be a reminder of God, or our neshama. So it is the bet, gimel, and daled that shelter the aleph and give it expression. Read into that. To understand God, to understand the soul, we can't articulate it. We need some type of tool that allows us to better understand something tangible that allows us to really be in touch with the soul. And thus, it should not be surprising that it can be very confusing because the aleph is mysterious. And we are now placed with the challenge of what are the clothing surrounding? What is it? Who is that person? At first glance, those of you who said that, clothing can be misleading, they're risky, because what matters is character, not how we dress. I think what can often be the case is we get lost in our clothing. We focus more on the Bet Gimel Daled in terms of how we see someone, and in terms of how we express ourselves. We get lost in the clothing that we wear, and we forget about that Aleph. If you look at the history of the priesthood, that is indeed the case. The priesthood really struggles. Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's children, die when they are offering a false sacrifice. The rabbis believe that was due to the fact that they were engaged in alcohol or drinking. There's a lot of different midrashim, all of which negate the character of Nadav and Avihu. The priesthood later, when we enter into the land of Israel, becomes a divided entity. What was supposed to be a central force for the Jewish people became something that, based on perhaps the clothing that you wore, you felt you could offer the service to those who looked at your clothing. And thus, you have competing cults when the people of Israel entered by each tribe. That each tribe had their own sacrificial places. It later demonstrated that the priesthood could become corrupt, even after the Jewish people centralized themselves under King David in Jerusalem and reestablished a central priestly genealogy. There was lots of challenges of a priest not correctly representing the priesthood and taking money for themselves as a source of corruption. And the greatest example is in the Second Temple period, separate from what the Romans did. The priestly class, the Sadducees, became very much corrupt. The Jewish people rebelled against them. The Pharisees, the sect that we belong to, that was the pathway of the rabbis, that focused much more on mitzvot, or the actions that a human being could do, as opposed to the class that they belonged to. It was the Sadducees who became corrupt, and according to our legend, according to the view of the rabbis, that is what began the downfall of the Jewish people during the time of the Second Temple. So we could see the challenge of clothing, and that the clothing can be misleading, and we can get lost in the clothing that we choose. Two other follow-ups on this. One is that before we abandon clothing, just something that could be redemptive and a pathway or a model that we can appreciate, is when we are in relationship with people that we know and people we love and care about, with our partners, we fluctuate between two ideas: attraction and attachment. And relationships that go over begin often with attraction, and then long-term relationships move to a model of attachment. And over a long period of time, my understanding is that you go back and forth. It's not that you just go from attraction, then you never follow up on attraction, but rather you're going back and forth from attraction to attachment. And that can be a nice model for how to live in harmony with clothing, which is, how we present ourselves really matters, but yet we have to learn to see the person within that clothing, to discover that Aleph, something that only takes place over a long period of time. And then lastly, there is a great midrash that many of us are familiar with. I don't know if we're aware that it is linked to this week's Torah portion. It's going to begin, and you'll be like, that sounds strange to me. And then many of you will see, oh, right, I am familiar with that story. There once was a non-Jewish person who read this week's Torah portion and who learned, these are the clothing that you will make. This person read the Torah and said, wow, oh my goodness, I want to convert to Judaism, dress in this clothing, and then I can be the Kohen Gadol. I can be the high priest. Non-Jewish person approaches Shammai and says, Shammai, I want to convert to Judaism. I want to be a high priest. And what does Shammai do? He takes something that's used to measure stones for a building and uses it to push the non-Jewish person away. The non-Jewish person then finds another rabbi, and he finds Hillel. And what does Hillel do? Hillel thinks to himself and says, go and study. Now, what was Shammai thinking and what was Hillel thinking? Shammai, well, we often read, if you know this story, as, he is so not welcoming, he is so cold, right? Of course we should not follow Shammai. But Shammai is also being very practical, saying, wait a second, it's not about the clothing, and you who are trying to connect to Judaism, connect to God through a superficial means, no. I'm going to use a tool that focuses on measurement, exactness. And though exactness is in terms of how we measure ourselves through the choices that we make. We've got to earn the title of being Jewish. It's not something that can come like winning the lottery, some superficial way like that. Hillel, though, chooses a different path. And why is it that we respect Hillel? Because Hillel should be saying, you're crazy. You can't become a Jewish person that way. And what rabbis feel that Hillel was teaching was that look at this person. This person wants to be holy. They just don't know how to do so. If they open up a Torah and they start to learn and they start to see the different pathway, the different elements of the pathway to follow, imagine what this person can become. What Hillel sees is not arrogance, but longing. He sees a soul attracted to holiness. Hillel looks beneath this person's garment at the concealed spark. It is Hillel who we follow because he sees all these things, and all these things are related because they are all ways of looking into someone and seeing something optimistic and hopeful. In the end of the days, what really marks and gives the Jewish people our character is our ability to carry on tikvah and hope. The Aleph is always a mystery, and it's very easy to get lost in the clothing that we wear. Our job, though, is to seek what is behind the clothing and to do so with the desire that what is behind it is something beautiful and holy that is striving to reveal itself in goodness. Shabbat Shalom.